What if I told you that decades before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel Comics had the idea of creating a multimedia pop star that would not only be a comic book superhero, but also a real-world singer complete with a music tour and a feature-length live-action rock opera that not only brought together a plethora of Marvel's biggest heroes, but also some of the era's greatest musical talent? This is the story of Dazzler, and although she's a C-tier hero at most these days, she was originally supposed to be one of the biggest deals in all of comics by headlining their first ever live-action movie. Hello and welcome to Because Comics, the show where I take a look at all the crazy, strange, and straight-up bizarre things that make comic books, well, comic books. I'm your host, Drake McWhorter. But before we jump too far into things, I want to quickly give a big thank you to our sponsor for today's video, Raycon, and their awesome everyday E25 earbuds. I love these things, and I wear them every day when I walk my dog and work out. And a big reason why I accepted this sponsorship was because I lost my last pair on a hiking trip, and they sent me this new pair as a part of the promotion. I absolutely love the seamless Bluetooth pairing and added bass compared to my normal wired headphones. And for as much as I use them, I almost never have to recharge them since I get about 6 hours of playtime. As you can see, they are super sleek and comfortable, and I think they look pretty nifty with none of those obnoxious stems. And they stay in my ears incredibly well. My glasses are gone before these, holy crap. If you're interested in getting a pair for yourself, perhaps as a holiday gift, then make sure you check the link in the description down below, buyraycon.com/comicdrake, and you will get 20% off of your order, which is a limited time offer. But anyway, back to the video. In the late 70s, Marvel Vice President Alice Donnenfeld was at a bar with her friend who mentioned that Marvel really didn't have all that many black characters, so he suggested one, a music-based character called the Disco Queen. Little did either of them know, this pub talk would start a chain reaction that would lead to one of Marvel's biggest canceled projects. But hold up, we know that Disco Queen eventually evolved into Dazzler, so how did a character that was literally conceived to add black representation to comics end up so whitewashed? Well, let's dig deeper. Alice Donnenfeld was in charge of developing Marvel's TV and movie projects, so she was well aware that the company had previously worked with Casablanca Records to produce a successful Kiss comic and an adaptation of the 1977 film The Deep, which was published by Casablanca's film division. According to former Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter, Donnenfeld pitched Disco Queen as a multimedia character. She would be this superhero that Marvel could make comics for, and then they would partner with Casablanca in order to produce a music album where a singer would perform as the title character. Now, this wasn't unheard of, since about a decade prior, Archie Comics was able to turn their main cast into a band called the Archies that was featured in their animated series. But in addition to that, a real-life band was assembled to release pop songs as the Archies. In fact, their song Sugar Sugar was a #1 hit, and I'm sure you've heard it at least once.
Sugar, oh, honey, honey.
Casablanca Records was very much on board with Marvel's idea, and they wanted to take it a step further by actually having their singer go on tour as Disco Queen. At this point, there was some talk about Donna Summer taking on the role, but nothing was set in stone. In the meantime, Jim Shooter assigned Tom DeFalco and John Romita Jr. to create the character, with the loose premise that she's a female musician with light-based powers that goes to clubs. Although it was DeFalco and Romita that did the bulk of the work, other high-profile talent at Marvel sat in on the brainstorming sessions like Stan Lee, Roger Stern, and Al Milgrom. Even Casablanca pitched some ideas, like wanting Disco Queen to talk, quote, funky black. The team settled on calling this new character Disco Dazzler as opposed to Disco Queen, since that was a bit on the nose. And this unreleased design made by Romita is the first concept art that we know of, with Dazzler being inspired by singer-slash-model Grace Jones, and the mask-like face paint was reminiscent of Kiss. The backstory that DeFalco came up with was that Dazzler was a mutant that could use her powers freely under the guise of the lights all being a part of the show, and his name for her alter ego was Evelyn Free. Nobody liked that name, so instead they went with Allison Blair. Allison meaning child of light, and Blair being a loud noise. Additionally, it's around this time that the codename Disco Dazzler was shortened to just Dazzler. Everything was going extremely smooth, and Casablanca decided that they also wanted to produce a half-hour animated special with all sorts of Marvel heroes and original characters to accompany Dazzler, which could be voiced by some of their talent. Jim Shooter took it upon himself to write the initial outline for the special, and it is nuts. He actually released it on his personal blog, so let's take a look.
Dazzler, Spider-Man, and the Avengers, which at this time consisted of Iron Man, Falcon, Beast, Scarlet Witch, and Wasp, are teleported into a future post-apocalyptic version of Manhattan that's divided between Upper Hatten, ruled by the Queen of Fire, played by Donna Summer, and Lower Hatten, ruled by the Witch Queen, played by Cher. The Marvel heroes are filled in by a lawyer played by Rodney Dangerfield and a random dude named Tristan played by Robin Williams. They explain that the heroes were brought into the future by the dastardly Lord Chaos because of a prophecy that a Sun Queen and her knights would appear in order to unite the two queendoms of Manhattan. The heroes are then attacked by both of the Queen's knights, Cher's Dread Knights played by Kiss, and Donna Summer's Stompers played by the Village People. Also, the members of both bands have powers based on their real-world personas. The groups have a three-way battle royale, with Spider-Man and the Avengers being defeated, Dazzler, Rodney Dangerfield, and Robin Williams make a getaway, and each of the squads take half of the heroes prisoner. Now, each of the queens is being advised by separate lawyers that are also being played by Rodney Dangerfield, and they also have jesters being played by Lenny and Squiggy. While the queens confront their various Marvel captives, Robin Williams is doing his best to try and seduce Dazzler because he's fated to fall in love with the prophesized Sun Queen. Dazzler is able to rescue all of the heroes, and the United Force confront the Queen's armies in one final showdown, where it's revealed that this war was being fought because Robin Williams seduced both of the queens, and due to manipulation from their lawyers, each of them thinks that the other stole Williams from them. It's also revealed that the three Rodney Dangerfields can combine together to reveal their true form, Lord Chaos, and he's been the one pulling the strings behind the scenes in order to create conflict that he can use to gain power and take over all of Manhattan. But thankfully, Dazzler is able to sing a big song that unites everyone in love, which defeats Lord Chaos and saves the day. Casablanca completely adored this pitch, and they loved it so much they wanted to do away with the animated special entirely and instead turn this into a feature-length live-action movie, which would have made this the first live-action Marvel movie to have ever been created. I mean, that is unless you don't count the Japanese Spider-Man TV show, which did get a movie spin-off, which was more like an extended episode of the show. Look, if you want more information, go check out my video on that, because it is bonkers. But tragedy struck when the music industry saw an economic downturn, with smaller record companies like Casablanca being hit the hardest. Not to mention that around this time, Casablanca was in the process of being bought out and was also being accused of accounting improprieties, so the Dazzler project went on the back burner and was eventually dropped altogether. With Casablanca no longer being able to finance the project, 100% of the rights to Dazzler now belong to Marvel, and not wanting to see their work go to waste, Shooter and Donenfeld pushed forward with what they could muster by talking to John Derek to direct the film and his wife Bo to star in it. Bo Derek was fresh off the heels of the movie 10 and was a hot commodity in the acting world. Shooter and Donenfeld were able to sit down with the star couple and get them interested in the project, complete with concept art of Bo as Dazzler. After this meeting, the four of them were ambushed by the paparazzi, and there the Derricks were, Marvel Comics in hand, making the front cover of People magazine, with Shooter and Donenfeld naturally being cropped out because they're not celebrities. The Derricks loved the Dazzler concept, and with them attached to the project, a bidding war between multiple movie studios erupted. Since comic books weren't taken seriously, and you could argue that they're still not to this day, Jim Shooter wasn't the one that was going to write the screenplay, and instead veteran screenwriter Leslie Stevens was brought on to do it. Stevens threw everything that Shooter had written out the window and completely bastardized Dazzler. The light powers? Gone. Instead, Stevens thought that a much better power was that she could be so beautiful that people were compelled to tell her the truth. Also, during this bidding war, Bo demanded that her husband had to be the director, otherwise she would walk. Here's the thing though, John Derek was infamous in Hollywood for going over budget and behind schedule on his films. Because of this, all of the studios withdrew their bids, and the Derricks soon walked away, which left Marvel stranded. They were able to get actress Daryl Hannah attached to the project, and Marvel tried to shop it around, but nobody was interested at this point. So there Marvel was with a fully developed character with nothing to do. They decided to feature her in books like X-Men, Spider-Man, and the Fantastic Four in order to build hype in hopes of launching a Dazzler solo series. The X-Men crossover was extremely significant because it wasn't just in the middle of some random side story. They introduced Dazzler in the middle of the freaking Dark Phoenix saga, one of the most famous X-Men storylines of all time. The thought process was that even though corporate interest to bring Dazzler to the big screen was low at the moment, maybe they would reconsider if she became a popular comic character first. Also around this time, comics started transitioning away from newsstands in favor of dedicated comic shops, so Jim Shooter suggested that they release a comic exclusively in these stores. Worried about pissing off the newsstand distributors that they were still working with, Marvel decided to try this experiment out with a lesser-known character. As a result, Dazzler's new solo series became Marvel's first ever comic to be sold directly to comic shops. The first 2 issues were actually a couple of old Marvel Super Special comics that were never made, but regardless of that shortcut, the comic sold over 400,000 units, which was insanely good, especially when you consider that Savage She-Hulk #1 was released a year prior and was considered to be a huge hit with 250,000 units sold. Despite the initial great sales, Dazzler's book lost a lot of steam. If you think about it, she was a character that was out of style before she even made her debut. After all, it was the 80s now, and the era of disco was coming to an end. Despite all the hype, Dazzler faded into the background of Marvel Comics. I mean, sure, she made plenty of appearances in Marvel properties over the years, but she was never really that big of a deal. And when it comes to movies, the most we've ever got to see of her was a very brief cameo in Dark Phoenix. I do have hopes that a Dazzler album will eventually get made, considering that in recent years we got a similar thing with a couple of sort of official songs from Spider-Gwen's band The Mary Janes being made by the rock band Married with Sea Monsters. I say sort of official because even though Marvel didn't pay for the songs or to my knowledge even give their permission, the band's members are personal friends with the artist of Spider-Gwen, Robbie Rodriguez, and they collaborated on the songs as the comic was being made. I know that hoping for Dazzler to get the same treatment is a bit of a pipe dream, but it would be a really cool way to celebrate the long and frankly fascinating history of the character.
I really enjoy going into the behind the scenes of how the comic industry works and all of these fascinating stories that come out as a result, and I hope you had as much fun watching this video as I did making it. So if you liked it, then hey, why not consider subscribing or even watching another one? And if you want to see more Because Comics, well, good news, this is an entire show, so I have a playlist you can check out and you can see every single one of those videos. But anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.